Yeah, as we come on to this podcast, if you're watching the podcast, you'll see Andy's in a Macho Man Randy Savage shirt. Andy, show us your shirt. There we go. You got the glasses. It's pink. It's purple. It says Macho Man. I mean, pure classic. But it brings me to a thing, Andy. Have you seen that they're selling Bono's or Bono's, or however you want to say it, Bono's sunglasses, his fly sunglasses.
Oh,
Um,
really?
Online, and I'm intrigued to get some. Would you rather go the fly sunglasses or Macho Man sunglasses, Andy?
Oof. I mean, I'll be honest, Dave. I appreciate both of them. I don't think I'd wear either one of those, but if I had to, just for pure entertainment, I might have to go the Macho Man route. There's just something special about him. I was thinking, Dave, I like to share my Lions hat ensemble with you, and this one always goes well with my Macho Man shirt because he was always like big fan of the bright colors, yeah. And so this is one of my favorites. This is the crucial catch Lions had, of course, from a few years ago in the NFL's support to identify cancer early. So I just like that one, and it goes well with the Sarasota, Florida Macho Man vibe.
How many hats do you have, Andy?
Dave's so many because I every year I'm like I've got way too much Lions stuff and I don't need any more hats, and then new season and I'm like, it's a really cool hat, and I get one and I get a new one, I get a workout hat. So it's ridiculous. I'm looking at my wall right now and it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But hey, it's all right. I'm happy to be a fan. Happy to be a fan.
Yeah.
Spent a lifetime you collect some hats.
Going back to the Macho Man part, did you ever see the bio on him, like the A&E bio? They did those
I
wrestling
don't think
bios.
I did. No, I don't think I
Yeah.
did.
They're very well done. I mean, they do all the major wrestlers. I think they've got Hulk and Stone Cold Steve Austin. They do them all, and I think
Yeah.
they're very well done. But it was very, I love Macho Man. He was one of my favorites. Just sad to see how he was. You go to dark places sometimes when you get into drugs and alcohol and all this other stuff. But how he came out near the end, and unfortunately his life was cut short there on stuff. So, but Andy, we got a lot of other things to get into other than your shirt and hat collection, which we do very appreciate it. Thanks. That's a good look there. You can definitely see your pecs there, Andy. So it's always good.
Straight up.
We're working out. I work out. Anyways, Andy, want to get a couple topics today, and then we'll do some wrap up, catch ups things at the end. But I want to start with something. We're going to stay on the sports topic probably pretty long today, but we're going to jump around different areas, Andy. So, Andy, I don't know if you noticed, the Premier Lacrosse League announced this week that they are having home cities. And if you're not familiar with lacrosse, and many of you probably are not, lacrosse is a sport that both our children or our kids played during their youth and into high school. And my son plays a little bit in college now too. But it's a great sport. We had a lot of fun with it. But they had a lacrosse league. Years ago, it was a Major League Lacrosse League, and then there was a splinter faction. All the stars decided have had enough of these owners making like garbage product and not paying us and treating us to pizza after the games. We're going to treat ourselves like a real league, and they splintered off and they formed the Premier Lacrosse League. It was founded by Paul Rabel, one of probably the Wayne Gretzky, I would say, of or Michael Jordan of lacrosse. Obviously, some people will say, no, there's this guy and this guy. I got it. I hear all your complaints. But Paul Rabel put his money where his mouth was and started this. And it's been very successful from all intents and purposes. But they were a roadshow type of environment. It was like golf. You go city to city. You don't have a home base. You don't have a home team. And they had some really unique names like the Chrome, the Atlas, Chaos, really great imagery. They were all over social media. I think they put together a really good product. But 4 years in, they decided, hey, we're going to, I think it's time to have home bases. And so they did this huge thing. And they have 8 teams. And now they've got the home bases out in, Washington, California, Utah, a couple other places. Carolina got a team here. And of course, the hotbeds for lacrosse, which is New York, Boston, Maryland, Virginia, those areas there. But I know you've gone to a lot of games, things in those areas. What do you think when you saw this Premier Lacrosse League stuff?
So, Dave, it was like a swift kick in the balls when I saw it. I was, we really enjoyed PLL. To your point, like the league came out. It's sort of predecessor league. The Major League Lacrosse just really wasn't exciting to anybody. And PLL came out, and I think it really was exciting. We went to the first championship match in Philly before taking in the Eagles-Lions game that same weekend. Fantastic weekend. We've been to other matches. We've been to Audi Field to watch matches, which is a great venue if you're in the DC area to get a chance to go to Audi Field. So we really enjoy it. And I've been a believer that eventually they should settle down with local teams, because I think that just builds an identity and a fan base. It's hard to be a traveling road show. You can't be the Ringling Brothers Lacrosse League, right? So I think it's a good move. But PLL pissed me off, man, because as you're rattling off those cities, Dave, and those states, and sort of like the big lacrosse hubs, there's the Boston Cannons, the California Redwoods, Carolina Chaos, Denver Outlaws, Maryland Whipsnakes, New York Atlas, Philadelphia Water Dogs, and there's even the Utah Archers. Dave, what was blatantly missing from that list is the Virginia team. And Virginia is a big state for lacrosse. And there's a lot of support here. There's a lot of youth lacrosse. There's a lot of parents spending a lot of money on lacrosse. And I think it's really a kick in the nuts to skip the state. And what happens in Virginia every time is, Maryland, Carolina, DC, it's sort of easy to skip Virginia because of the surrounding, states and cities. And so we don't have any major professional sports teams in the state. And sort of the throwaway is, well, you've got DC or whatever, but I don't live in DC. Screw DC teams. Don't live in Maryland. You've got your Carolina Chaos down there. And for heaven's sakes, there's a Utah team. I was really pissed that Virginia's not recognized. It is my dream, Dave. I will share this with you and all of America. It is my dream to eventually own a pro sports organization of any kind. It could be like the third layer down, mixed gender flag football league. I don't care. What. Eventually, I want to own a pro sports team. That's the dream, and it'll be in Virginia. That's my big audacious goal one day. And PLL let me down, but by God, Virginia, I will bring professional sports here before I'm in the grave.
Andy, literally, so you want to be Ryan Reynolds, own a team, Wrexham, you want to do that road. I'm here, Andy, I'm here for that, and I would love to venture into a team with you, but we can definitely do that. I've always wanted I think the Premier Lacrosse League, I think they're in a tough spot, right? Because they could go to just simply the hotbeds and just say, it'd be all East Coast and Mid-Atlantic and East Coast up. And it would crumble, I think. And I felt like they really had to go to Utah and California. You can say, oh, those are emerging markets for lacrosse and all this other stuff, but it is a tough sell with some of these places. I was glad to see, though, that they did branch out a little bit. That doesn't mean you won't still get a team in Virginia or some sort, because they have I think because the way their schedule is, they have 8 home teams.
Yeah.
And each home team will have a week. But I think they have also some at-large locations. They'll play in Minnesota or Chicago, or they'll play in different places. What do you think of the Premier League, like the product on the field? I mean, how do you? Because you said it, like the MLL, the Major League Lacrosse, was a garbage product. I mean, it was almost like a couple high schoolers putting together a production tape. The Premier Lacrosse League, they do all the bells and whistles. They've got great coverage. It looks like a professional product. They're huge on social media. My concerns with let me get what do you think on the product, and then I got a couple concerns with the league, and I think that might stymie them. But
I'll tell you, lacrosse is it's not as well known a sport around the country as a lot of our other major sports are. I'll say it is a super exciting sport to watch, and PLL games have not let me down. I mean, we went to the championship game in DC a few years ago, and Blaze, who was the goalie for the Chaos at the time, just put on a show of skill and professional craftsmanship, and that the whole time it was, and the road show approach they take, it's a lot of fun. It's great to watch. The league is doing great, and like I said, professional and crisp production. It is a great time, and I commend them. And one thing I love about PLL is, I like to give people the middle finger in challenging the way that we do things, and PLL is sort of insistent on doing things differently, right? The way the league organized, adding the 2-point goal into the game. There's just this sort of, I don't want to say, it's not smugness. I think some people might mistake it as smugness. I think it's just sort of this like, let's do things different and better. And that I love and I commend them for. And that's really why I was so hopeful we'd see a team here in Virginia, because I really love to support it. So I actually really like what they've done and are doing. And I think even though they've pissed me off here, I think there's really great potential for it. And lacrosse makes, I think, for great television viewing. And it's a fantastic game to take in live if you get the chance to do that.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think a lot of those things you've said is just right on. They do a really great thing. They've integrated a lot of stuff. They've just made it. They brought that professionalism to it. I think I just get and the games are exciting. I think it is hard. I think it's hard to cut in. You have the professional leagues. Hockey, they're a fourth major sport, but they have a hard time cutting into the mainstream with the 24/7, 365 of football now. Then you have NBA that's trying to do all of this with their new in-season tournament and all these other things. And baseball, it's like the constant, right? There's always baseball trucking along through the year. It's hard to cut in, but I think they've done a good job of it. I worry, the things I worry about them is, one, there's no open books. It's owned by Paul Rabel and his, and while they have home teams, it doesn't feel like they have home ownership. So it's almost like a WWE script, and Paul Rabel's notorious for knowing about WWE. It's almost like, hey, that guy got traded to this team. Is that because, he lives closer there? Or is that because they want to create a storyline, or what are they trying to do here? So there's a little bit of that. It doesn't feel like the teams operate independently. That's one thing. The books are not open. Like they're I can tell you, they're burning gobs of cash. They're almost like a startup. When you have to go through a series of funding routines, it doesn't mean because you're making a lot of money. It means you've got a lot of ambitions and you want to do a lot of money. They've got big investors. Kevin Durant's an investor. Joe Tsai is an investor. A lot of these great names are there, but until you open the books, until you know how we're spending the money, it's hard to be really taken seriously on some of those fronts. But I am encouraged. I think it's going to be exciting. Hopefully this is a transition with home teams now into independent, maybe ownership groups and stuff. But it just is hard. I mean, they go up against they're playing in the summer, which is hard in itself because there's a lot of kids doing things and doing sporting events, and lacrosse is very heavily like youth lacrosse in the summer. It's huge. And so they're competing against that. The market they're trying to get is actively engaged on the weekends. And then they play their championship game during the first couple of weeks of the NFL season, which, sorry, but NFL is going to win out there. So they have some challenges ahead, but I think lacrosse in general, it is a sport on the rise. I would be interested though, and if you want to go into a Frisbee football team, I'm happy to bring Frisbee football to Virginia if you like. So
one, I agree with everything you said. I think it's very accurate there. Good assessment. And I noticed you left a Major League Soccer off your list of major sports today. Right. So MLS is still a lot of fun, and they brought some great talent like Mr. Messi to Miami. So another great league. It is hard because of the major dominance of America's traditional sports, but I think it's great to see it come up. And I also sort of understand the idea of sort of centralized ownership as they try to get it going. I think that time will pass. I have confidence in the guys that it will. But on the Frisbee League, I mean, Dave, there is nothing off the table. It is some type of professional sports organization in the Commonwealth. So maybe we'll team up there. KD, if you're investing in PLL and you need somebody to sort of drive one of those home teams for you at some point, feel free to reach out. Happy to work with you, buddy. So Dave, we're open to all ideas, from frisbee to beer golf, sprint golf, whatever it is. I do not care. But Virginia needs a team and merch and a sports league. And again, Virginia, I've got, I'm about maybe halfway through my run here is my hope. Before I'm 6 feet under or powder or whatever it is that my kids decide to do with me one day, I will bring pro sports to Virginia. That's the dream.
There we go. I'm here for that too, Andy. So, well, let's wrap that up. And look, I think it'll be interesting to see. Maybe we'll talk a little Premier Lacrosse League wrap ups because they kick off at times when we can't talk football. So maybe that'll be our sports check in during the league, Andy. That'll be a lot of fun. I'll be rooting for the Carolina Chaos, and we'll take you on, Andy. So
I don't even know who I am, Dave. I don't even know who I'm cheering for at this point. It's tough. It's just tough.
I can appreciate it. All right, Andy, let's go into another topic that's kind of related. So this last weekend, I was with my daughter in Maryland, speaking of the hotbeds, and she plays girls lacrosse. And as I noted, my second son, he played lacrosse growing up, as did one of your boys. And my son wound up playing in college for a little bit. He went to Jacksonville University, and then he wound up transferring for a lot of different reasons to Virginia Tech, where both of our boys go. He plays club lacrosse there. But the growing up process was quite a different experience in respect of we spent a lot of time at lacrosse tournaments. And look, I'm going to use lacrosse just as an example, but it really applies to almost all these sports now. There's, baseball tournaments dominate the summer. But what I'm concerned about is my daughter's, I think she's a good lacrosse player. She has no desire to play in college. Yet we go to these tournaments, we play on these club teams, and we go to these tournaments. There are no, you don't really keep score. I mean, you do keep score because you need to know who wins and loses and whatnot, but there's no championship. There's no like trophy at the end for whoever won your age bracket. Years ago, everybody, the big knock is everybody gets a trophy or whatever. Now nobody gets a trophy, but you go to these big events, you pay a lot of money, you travel many hours away to it, generally speaking, all for the hope that somebody on some sideline from some college, whether that's Division I, Division II, Division III, is going to look at your child and say, hey, I think you should come to X college and be here. And it's getting to be quite a racket, I feel. I think it's quite a disturbing trend because a lot of kids, look, when we were growing up, Andy, you had recreational sports. Usually the county ran them or the local community ran them. And then if you were lucky, you made an all-star team or some sort of thing, and you may go play the neighboring thing. Again, get off my lawn. We're going to talk to that some point here. Obviously, there are people who wanted more than that. They wanted to push themselves and challenge, all for the right reasons, right? All for the right things. And so they created more travel programs where then the select group from each of those communities would go and travel around the communities. And if you're lucky, maybe you went to another state or a big tournament. And now there's, on top of the travel teams, because those weren't good enough, you needed a club team that you could play with kids from all over the nation again. So maybe you're playing with a kid from Colorado or New York or Florida or whatever. And you go to these events all because people say you can get that one scholarship, that one thing in college to go play. What they don't realize is all the money you spend along the way and all the people who are marketing and exploiting these. I think we're in a really tough spot. We're not going to be able to get into all of it today, Andy, but I'm concerned by what I see because my daughter loves to play lacrosse. She loves to play high-level lacrosse. No interest in playing college, but here I am. And this weekend, my wife has taken her down to Florida for a long tournament. We're getting on ridiculousness.
Yeah, it is. I think lacrosse is maybe a little different than some of the other sports, and it really is tournament based to get that visibility. Football, there's still, high school teams are still the breeding ground for college recruitment, and if you're on a good team, you have a chance to get scouted out and viewed. Lacrosse is a little bit different, but soccer can be similar. Other sports can be similar, and it is a challenge. I think there's that desire of parents to give their kids the greatest opportunity to. We've talked about this, in recent podcasts, where to be the best they can be, enjoy their sports and their youth and have chances to go at a higher level. but it really is sort of a mixed bag. Like, you're pushing your kids more than they really need to. You're spending a lot of time. You are spending a lot of money. A lot of kids don't want to play in college, or they get there and they realize, like, wow, this is my entire life, and I don't want this to be my entire life. It is a challenge. I think as parents, you sort of get caught up in things. Both my boys play lacrosse, actually, and youth is spent a lot of time running around playing different activities and clubs and scouts and all the different things that you do. I think it's good for all parents to sort of pause and be like, hey, are we doing things the way we actually want to do them, or are we sort of caught up into whatever grind we're caught up into? Is that the right thing for our kids? It's tough. I mean, parenting is always tough. Being a kid, trying to compete, it's fun. I mean, you enjoy it, but it is a lot of time, and at times can be a lot of pressure. So I think it is important to sort of pause and reflect on those things. And from the sort of sports teams and tournaments perspective, like it's mixed, right? I mean, part of it, there is a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of good things for those that are running and organizing these things. At the same time, they are great venues and opportunities, and it is a lot of fun to travel to a different state with your team and play other teams and see schools and kids from around the country. Like, there's goodness in it, even as it's challenging. So I think it is really a mix. I love, just like I love home lacrosse teams, the idea of that. I think there's something really special about being able to play for your high school team and having that local identity, and you're part of the community, right? And it's your rival against your town rival. I remember when I was a kid growing up, and we beat our town rival and got to do the parade through downtown Vienna, Virginia. Like, that was just a ton of fun, right? Like, we were the local champs for that year. There's something special about that camaraderie and community. So it's a mix, Dave. But I'm glad that you are investing in your children, regardless, even if they are being taken for hours of their time and youth in sports competition.
Yeah, and I don't mean to sound all negative about it, because we do. Like, I reflect on those times with my son, and then now with my daughter, about spending the we drive to a lot of these things, and so there's a lot of long hours in the car. You have the weekend with them. It's fun time and stuff. I just worry, when we build these constructs of like, hey, it's just all about the individual in these things, we lose out on that local community. I think, as you were mentioning, because the high school team is not as important as the club team, because your rival, who you used to hate growing up and never play against unless you're on competing teams, that might be the same guy you are trying to go to college with, and it just is an interesting thing. It's an interesting dynamic, but we'll probably dig into that a little bit more of that, Andy, more. But I want to spend the last part of this podcast now talking about just some odds and ends. I know you've always got some good things to catch up on. So what are you reading at? What are you looking at, Andy, right now? And anything on the current event side that you're seeing?
Well, Dave, there's a lot going on. I was going to get a couple of things that I won't get into. I'll touch on a couple of the interesting political headlines. One, we've talked many times about our absolutely crappy elected leadership at the national level. Just in a recent incident, Moody's has said that they are downgrading the U.S. financial ranking in some areas, and they expect interest payments relative to revenue to rise from 9.7%, where it is today, to 26% in 2033. And I just wanted to point out the absolute fiscal irresponsibility of our leadership as we condemn our kids' future to burdensome debt. And thanks, White House, Congress. Thanks for being absolutely focused on the moment you're in, and not forward looking for our youth. So that's my one gripe, Dave. That's my complaint for the moment. A couple interesting topics. One, the GOP. We've made fun of the Republican Party a few times because they just make it so bloody easy. This week, fights in Congress, right? I mean, you've got the recently made former Speaker of the House elbowing a fellow congressman in the hallways of Congress while he's doing an interview. You've got another official, I think a senator, if I recall. I'll have to double check that. But Senator Mullen from Oklahoma challenging the president of the Teamsters to a fight in the Senate. Like, if you want to fight somebody, like, that's great. But in Congress, like, you're going to get up and flex on somebody. It's like what are we doing? What on earth are we doing? So we've got, I think I was banging on him for like childish name calling a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Now we're throwing elbows and challenging those that are testifying to fights because they made personal remarks about you. Like what the hell are we doing? So I don't know, Dave. What I mean, I know you for a long time identified with the Republican Party. What does it feel like to see this absolute? Again, we'll come back to the Ringling brothers, in Congress today.
There's no better way, Andy, than to drop the people's elbow than if you're in Congress, right, Andy? So if you're going to drop the elbow, drop the people's elbow in the Congress. Look, Andy, it's comical. I mean, look, last week was enough or earlier, maybe it was earlier this week, where that the party of eight, the group of eight, or whatever they're calling themselves, are already upset with the new speaker because dare they cut a deal to pass a budget and not have to worry about the CNN ticker all the time. It's utterly preposterous. Like, we're a clown show here. At this point, that group of eight should just go off and form. I love the term rhino. Republican in name only. Those people have coined other people who are maybe more moderate. They're rhinos, right? Maybe they should just go form their own party and call themselves something different, because that's the point we're at. I was listening to a really good podcast the other day about, again, we talked on Tuesday, when it was the earlier show this week, about the third parties, right? And like the importance of this, and everyone's saying how this is, again, the election you can't afford to mess up. Here we go, that stuff again. And I think the concern really is the third party that comes in now is going to not affect Trump, because he's got his loyal Trumpers that are not going to sway no matter what. It's going to affect Biden more than anything else. And in that case, Trump wins. You affect Biden, Trump wins. So let's get rid of the third parties just because we want Biden to win and not Trump. Look, I don't know if you saw any of the news this week, Andy, or the images of Biden this week. The guy is old and he looks awful on TV. I mean, he looks like he's trying to take an earpiece out of it. Look, again, I'm not trying to be like all this drama and stuff. He's taking the earpiece out. He's like, it takes 5 minutes for him to put it down on the table. I mean, that is not presidential. The Democrats, if they really want to defeat Trump, they need to put a different candidate on. That's just what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, I mean, we talked before. I mean, he's old and he looks old and he's getting older. I mean, that's just reality. I still think he's out there running an aggressive schedule and doing a lot. And I think he can beat Trump, to be honest. But I think it's interesting to see the conversation. And again, that worry of, you've got to vote for this guy because or the other guy's going to win, right? And so that's interesting. I think, on that note, once again, don't mean to get stuck on this guy, but RFK Jr. picking up some endorsements from high-profile sports athletes, not necessarily the most loved athletes, but John Stockton, legendary basketball player. As we grew up, Dave, a Dream Team member, he came out in support of RFK. So interesting to see that continues to develop, and I think that's a threat to both Trump and Biden. To be honest, I think he will pull voters from both of those two, which is impossible to account for, which is interesting. I think another interesting development there. While Mr. Trump is the presumptive Republican nominee, when he ran when he ran originally, there was I think it was 347 Republicans were running for the presidential nomination that year, right? And so even though he wasn't necessarily the most loved guy, there's so many opponents that nobody really became a challenger to him. It was just Trump squashing everybody, which he did impressively. It's a little different this time around, as the Republican field winnows down pretty quickly. Most recently with Senator Tim Scott stepping away, who I think was a genuinely nice guy, also a wrestling enthusiast, also in an interracial relationship, which I commend, because as I found out 20 years into my marriage, I was in an interracial marriage, which I never thought about until that thought came to my mind. Right? So, which I was like, oh my gosh, that's us too. But anyway, besides the point, he was a nice guy, whether you liked his politics or not. But with him dropping out, there's only 4 real viable candidates on the Republican side, and that's going to continue to narrow. And I wouldn't even say 4 of them are viable. More and more, it's looking like Nikki Haley is becoming the alternative candidate to Trump, and there's still a lot of time before that first primary goes. And if it becomes a choice between Donald Trump and Nikki Haley, and Republicans decide, am I going to go with this guy, that guy? I think she's a lot more competitive in a one-on-one match than it is when there's 80 opponents challenging Donald Trump. So while he is sort of the presumed nominee, it still is early, and he's still going through a lot of stuff. It could be interesting. There could be something really to watch here. And again, whether you like Nikki Haley or not, she's a presence, and she's strong, she's sharp, she's bold. Again, you might not like her politics or her personally, but she's a very viable candidate. And so I think it's very interesting to see this playing out. And she could actually, I think, be a real option for Republican voters, which is just an interesting thing to watch. Just like RFK is an interesting thing to watch. I think there's still a lot of politics ahead at the national level. So we'll see where it goes, Dave.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up, Andy, but I do really like Nikki Haley a lot. I think she's come on a lot stronger, and she's withstood a lot of attacks against her. She's going to be able to withstand the Trump attacks. I think, honestly, look, if you're going against Trump, you have a litany you have a dump truck full of ways to attack him. I think if you probably get Democrats in a room, they're probably a little more concerned with Nikki Haley because she has a legitimate record. She has a lot of standing. She doesn't have at least not that we know of, the trail of tears behind her trail of destruction behind her. And I think she's a really good candidate. And I would be optimistic. Look, I would vote for Nikki Haley today. And I think she'd be a really good president. I think it'd be great. I think we have a lot of things to overcome for her to get there, but I'd be optimistic. I think there is a lot of time still. It is only November. The first primaries are not until next year, early next year, but there's a lot of time to make up stuff, and Trump has got a lot on his agenda. If he's a convicted felon, that changes a lot of things, and it's not going to change his core base. It never does. It doesn't change anybody's base. They're going to believe them because of what they want to believe. But I do think it could potentially, especially if they get one-on-one on a debate, it could be really interesting. So a lot to talk there. So for sure, it'd be a good political podcasting for us in the next couple coming weeks.
Sure, lots to come back to.
All right, Andy, we're going to wrap up this week. Next week, we are going to get into a little holiday celebration stuff. So get ready for your food choices. We'll talk a little bit about celebrations, and then we're going to get into a little holiday themed movie discussions. Maybe not next week, but we'll get into it at some point in the coming weeks here, Andy. Right. Anything else you'd like to say before we sign off, Andy?
Dave, I'll just say, one, if you're a music fan, last week Sheryl Crow dropped a new album.
Oh, yeah.
Sheryl Crow's very talented and a lot of fun. Her new song is just full of sort of catchy vibes, worth checking out. Some other really good new music too, Jen Wigmore, as well as a few others that are worth checking out. So those are fun. Sheryl Crow might have been 2 weeks ago, actually. And then lastly, Dave, I'm just excited to see the Lions play Chicago this week. Chicago is awful. The Lions are going to a 4-game stretch of really lousy opponents, including a home game against Chicago this week and Chicago again in a month. So Dan, biggest onions in the NFL, Campbell is going to lead his team to victory. Lions are going to be 8-2, Dave. Super exciting. So we'll come back on Victory podcast when we report on Tuesday, and I'll be very excited about that because right now, again, the Lions are on the path to the number 1 seed in the NFC. Super exciting.
Well, Godspeed to your Lions, Andy. Good luck. All right. With that, Andy, we'll call it a show today, and we'll talk with you next week.